Miss Traveler are headed over to San Marcos de Apalache Historic State Park, little museum over here in St. Marks, Florida.
There is a natural province in northwest Florida that seems as remote and unaffected by the ebb and flow of human history as any place in America. Here at the confluence of the Wakulla and St. Marks rivers is a world of deep silence and solitude. In the vast saltwater marshes, alligators prowl, and in the shadowed woodlands dwell Florida black bear, white-tailed deer, and more than 300 species of birds. Beyond in the bay, a bottlenose dolphin, manatee, and a rich diversity of marine life. Occasionally, fishermen on their way to the Gulf were vaguely aware that there were ruins behind the trees, but they passed on by, unaware of the story these ruins could tell. For there was a time when these few acres were the site of a clash between global powers. In the 16th century, mankind's view of the world changed dramatically. Ships flying the flags of European nations sailed out to explore new seas, new lands, new horizons. The great powers of Europe sent their most able captains in search of new lands to expand their empires. Spain was convinced that Florida was a door to gold and treasures even greater than that of Mexico and Peru. Both England and France sought to establish colonies in the New World. They all brought their men of God, who wished to convert the native people to Christianity. For some 400 years, this small site was a stage on which a powerful human drama was enacted. What happened here changed the flow of world history. If there are ghosts in the world, they would certainly be here, in the shadow of these old oaks, the cypress swamps, and the endless marsh. In this small, remote, unremembered province, the St. Marks and the Wakulla rivers flow through northwest Florida and through the labyrinth of time. In this place are buried the dreams of adventurers from 9 nations. For 400 years, they came to this lonely outpost to claim it as their own, for their people, for their flag. They dreamed and fought and feared and triumphed, and here they died. Yet here, in this wilderness, here today, they still seem close by in this lost outpost of empires. Not far from here, 2 men moved across the land. One was a hunter of the Apalache, a proud, powerful people whose ancestors had lived in the area for some 12,000 years. The other was a seaman under the command of the Spanish conquistador Pánfilo de Narváez, a one-eyed, red-haired explorer who had come to Florida in search of gold and glory. It was the year 1528. The Spanish expedition had come to the land of the Apalache with 300 men, 40 on horses, all heavily armed with Toledo steel. The Apalache were armed with only their bows and stone-tipped arrows. But that was enough.
It is like fighting the wind. They strike us and then they disappear into the forest. Bows so powerful, the arrows penetrate right through our armor. The archers so accurate that they can kill a man at 200 paces. They cut us down one by one.
They came to our villages,
took our women and children. They stole our food. They're brave, but very foolish. They were clothes of heavy iron and the weighed down. They have only this greed for yellow metal, a metal that's as useless as their armor.
Exhausted, near starving, the desperate Spaniards who survived built boats from what they had at hand, wove rigging from the tails of horses, made nails from their armor. Those who set sail were never seen again. Of the 300 conquistadors, only 4 survived to make their way into lands that would become Texas. One of the survivors was an African, a man history remembers as Esteban the Black, one of several Moors who accompanied the Spaniards. Another was Cabeza de Vaca, who lived to write a journal of their adventures among the Apalache. A decade later, Hernando de Soto would follow with 600 conquistadors. Known for his cruelty, he too would be pursued and harassed by the arrows of Apalache archers before he moved on. In his first collision of worlds, it was the Apalache who emerged the victors. In the 1590s, Appalachian leaders began to view the Spanish presence with new eyes. They sent word that they would accept friars to live among them and teach them about the new faith of the Spanish. By this time, European diseases brought by the invaders had run rampant through native villages. Perhaps the Apalache thought the faith of the friars would protect them from this strange dying. The Spanish soon established a chain of missions across North Florida. One of the most important was San Luis, built just to the north at Tallahassee. To protect access to San Luis, the Spanish built a wood fort here at the junction of the St. Marks and Wacala rivers. But 3 years later, the fort was overrun by French pirates.
I admit it was a shrewd plan. At first, we were not too eager to attack the stone fort, because it seemed too strong, too well defended. But then, we realized that it was merely made of wood and painted to look like stone. A trick. So 2 squirrels, armed with bottles filled with gunpowder and scrap iron, attacked.
The pirates took me and 2 other friars hostage. They sent me to San Luis to arrange ransom for the other 2 friars. But because we Franciscans had come out of poverty, there was no money to give them. Thank God the pirates saw the humor of the situation. And after they burned and looted the fort, they let us go.
In the first Spanish period, the fort of San Marcos de Apalache became a sizable community. To the north was some of the most fertile land in Florida. Mission sites like San Luis were the source of corn and grain that was brought down the river and shipped to Cuba and St. Augustine to supply the garrison. A thriving trade in deer skins and cattle was established. The Spanish built a stone fort to protect this important trade from pirates. The fort also served to secure access to the interior from the threat of English ships out of Charlestown and Jamaica. But when the fort was only half finished, it was taken without a shot fired. In 1763, as a result of the French and Indian War, control of West Florida was transferred from the Spanish to the British. The last Spanish outpost was San Marcos de Apalache. The Spanish were forced to leave.
My name is Senora Ventura Diaz, and my husband is, or should I say was, commander of this fort. And it is an outrage that British officers have invaded our country and my household. Had they won the fort honorably in battle, that would be one thing. But they took San Marco de Apalache with politics, not courage.
It was like serving at the last place on earth. Pay was terrible. I was sick and hungry. There was nothing to do. All we could do was fish, hunt for clams and oysters, so we had enough to eat.
After the American Revolution in 1783, Spain regained control of Florida, including the fort of San Marcos de Apalache. A few years later, Spain granted the trading firm of Panton, Wesley and Company exclusive trading rights in the area. Their store was located 3 miles above the fort on the Wacalla River. The Spanish offered the firm exclusive rights in order to keep traders from the United States from encroaching on Spanish territory. Enter a fascinating character named William Augustus Bowles.
It seemed like everyone was fighting for Creek lands. The British, the Spanish, and the Americans from the north. But Bowles fought for us, for the Indians. He promised to create an independent nation for the Creeks and the Cherokees, and he kept his promise.
Bowles was a desperate adventurer. Nothing more. A wandering troublemaker. He never kept a promise in this life.
In 1792, Bowles landed near the fort with a force of 50 men. He captured the fort and the Panton Wesley store and claimed the area for his new independent nation of Muskogee. When the Spanish at Pensacola learned of the raid, they set sail in a flotilla of 10 armed ships. The Spanish retook the fort. Bowles was captured and deported to Spain via Cuba, but eventually escaped to London to write his memoirs. In the late 18th century, a confederation of displaced Creek tribes, along with escaped slaves from Carolina and the Caribbean, used Spanish territory in Florida as a base to stage raids against settlers across the border to the north. The Seminoles, as they were called, were armed by the Spanish, and the primary distribution point of the arms was at Fort San Marcos de Apalache. General Andrew Jackson, hero of the war against the Red Stick Creeks at Horseshoe Bend, was determined to put a stop to the Seminole incursions. He hoped to appease Southern planters who were concerned about their close proximity to the non-white population in Spanish Florida. In 1818, the old fort would once again be the site of conflict when Andrew Jackson's men reached the walls.
General Andrew Jackson. They call him Old Hickory. He never had a minute's military training. There was never a tougher, meaner, and braver general than Old Hickory. Man's too tough to kill. Once, one of our soldiers ran from a fight. Jackson had us line up. We shot him dead.
My name is Alexander Arbuthnot, and tomorrow I am to be hanged. Jackson claimed that Lieutenant Armbruster and I incited the Indians against the United States. But we are merely traitors, British subjects. Surely Jackson will come to his senses and commute the sentence. He must know that our execution will cause a diplomatic crisis.
Both Arbuthnot and Armbruster were executed. Arbuthnot on his own ship called the Last Chance. Jackson withdrew in 1819. 2 years later, Spain ceded Florida to the United States. For the last time, the flag of Spain was lowered from the ramparts. A garrison of the 4th U.S. Infantry occupied the fort in U.S. territory under the command of Brigadier General Winfield Scott. Most of the troops that Jackson left behind died of disease, and they're buried here in a cemetery far from home. By 1837, cotton was king in the former Apalache lands. The people of the territorial capital built the Tallahassee-St. Mark's Railroad to help move the cotton crop to the coast. From St. Mark's, the cotton was loaded onto ships for transport to market. Although only 20 miles long, the railroad would serve the area for nearly 150 years. While the railroad flourished, the old fort fell into disrepair. In 1861, the bastions were largely dismantled, the large stones used to build a military hospital for ailing sailors. As in Jackson's time, death by disease at this lonely outpost was not an uncommon occurrence.
Seems strange in this old fort where so many men died become a place of healing. Men still alive. Sailors that braved cannon fire in the most terrible storms, and quietly in their sleep. Yellow fever's as deadly as any cannon.
In 1861, Confederate forces took the fort, rebuilt its defenses, and named it Fort Ward. Throughout the Civil War, Union ships blockaded the mouth of the St. Marks River. But the fort's cannon prevented an approach from the Gulf of Mexico. Instead, Union soldiers snuck around the fort and up the St. Marks River under cover of darkness. The fort's last battle was not at the fort itself. It was a few miles upriver at Natural Bridge. It was here in 1865 that the Union forces were stopped. But it was Fort Ward, by denying the Union access to the interior by river, that made this last victory possible. Then, after 400 years, the guns of the old Fort San Marcos de Apalache fell silent. They came here from many nations: Apalache, Spain, Africa, England, France, Muscovy, the United States, the Confederacy. They came here to these few acres, lived here, fought here, and died here. For 400 years, this was a place of struggle and conflict. Now, in this last lost outpost of empire, the ghosts of Fort San Marcos de Apalache are finally at rest.